Hey guys, my name is Matthew. Today we're going to be talking about the weather in the UK. Here we go. In this video, we're going to be talking about the cultural elements of the weather in the UK, as well as the literal physical elements of the weather. So temperature and humidity and precipitation and things like that. The first thing that I think is noteworthy is British people believe that they talk about the weather more than anyone else. It's funny because that's something you hear all the time, is how British people love to talk about the weather. And there's a grain of truth in that, but I actually think that British people aren't the best about talking about the weather. I've been all over the world and I've lived in lots of different places, and actually I think the best people at talking about the weather are farmers. They talk about the weather constantly. But everywhere I've ever lived, people talk about the weather. They love to talk about it because it's non-political and it's easy to talk about, and everyone experiences the weather. It's relatable for everyone. What British people are actually the best at is complaining about the weather. This has been especially noteworthy to me here now we're in the summer because the weather is beautiful. I'm going to talk in Fahrenheit because it's easier for me. It's like 70 degrees today. And I had someone call me today and we talked about the weather a bit, and they said, oh yeah, we got to watch out for that heat. Make sure you're getting enough water and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's 70 degrees. It's like perfect weather. This is ideal weather in so many ways. And no matter what the weather is, you find that people complain about it when you're in the UK. It doesn't seem to make a difference whether or not it's absolutely beautiful out, or if it's raining, or if it's windy. They always have a reason to complain. So 70 is like perfect weather, and people are still complaining about it being too hot and the heat wave and all those types of things. It's quite funny. Obviously, heat in the UK at 70 or 75 degrees Fahrenheit is maybe more than it would be in parts of the US where aircon is not very common, but it still remains to say that no matter what the weather is, people in the UK tend to complain about it. Now, as we start to talk more about the different elements of weather, it's important to understand why the UK's weather is the way it is. You'd think for as far north as it is, because it actually is much further north than people think. Even more than I actually tend to think as well. For me, it's easy to imagine the UK as being roughly at the same latitude as like New York City, for instance, like the northern part of the United States. And it's actually further north than that. It's actually on par with like the middle part of Canada. But the other aspect that really affects the weather in the UK is the fact that we're on an island. The UK has island weather. Actually, if I were to properly compare the US and the UK, the state that has the most similar weather to the UK is actually Hawaii. Hawaii is very similar to the UK in the fact that their temperature and their climate and their weather is so temperate throughout the year. Of course, a comparison video between the UK and Hawaii would be kind of lame, so we're going to go ahead and stick to the continental United States and some places that I've actually lived in the US, and of course the UK where I've actually lived as well. Okay, one pervasive myth about the UK is that it has a ton of rainfall, and it's actually not true at all. Of course, it seems sometimes like there's a lot of rain, and tends to be like drizzly rain throughout a lot of the winter in my experience, but actually if you look at the charts, London gets less annual rainfall than New York City, Paris, or Sydney, Australia. In fact, most major capitals of the world actually get more rainfall than London. So why does this myth exist? Not really sure. Maybe you can let me know in the comments. So as far as temperature in the UK goes, it's actually super temperate, which what that means is that as I compare it to some different places, like I've got Colorado and Texas and Michigan here, you'll see the lows in the United States and the highs in the United States are both lower than the lows in the UK and higher than the highs in the UK. It gets hotter and it gets colder in most parts of the United States than it does in the UK. Now, of course, there are times when you have, high and low temperatures, and there are times that exceed those normal averages, but the averages for the UK are almost always going to be more temperate than the highs and the lows in the US. Another factor in the weather of the UK is the fact that it is so far north that the light changes drastically throughout the year. Right now in the summer, because right now it's beautiful out and it's summer and it's like 70 degrees, like I said, it's beautiful, and it's actually like 7 p.m. here. It's crazy how it looks like it's 3 p.m. The sun is bright, and actually it won't like stop being bright until like 10 p.m. like really late in the evening. And actually I've heard that in some parts of the UK There is actually a time of year, like right now, where it never stops being bright. Not that they never have any darkness at all, but that it never gets to full total darkness at any point during the night. That's a big deal. In the winter, it feels like there's long stretches of time where there's no light at all. Like there's a few hours of daylight and then suddenly it's just darkness again. You leave for work in the dark and you get back from work in the dark, and it's not because you're working late hours. So the light has a huge effect on the weather here in the UK. One of the greatest things about the weather in the UK is that there are like no natural disasters. You know, obviously in the US there are tons of natural disasters. You know, if you're in California, you're getting earthquakes. If you're in Colorado or Michigan, you're getting blizzards on the reg, maybe 3 or 4 in a season. You may find, or even out of season. This year, Colorado got blasted by a blizzard in like June, early June. If you're on the East Coast, you're getting hit by hurricanes. There's tornadoes through all of Tornado Alley and the whole kind of central part of the States. And in the UK, you don't get any of that. Not that you couldn't get hit by a blizzard. That's, I guess, possible every couple of years, but it's really unlikely. And that's about the worst natural disaster that you tend to get, because you have this beautiful temperate weather and you're protected by the sea around you. And so the UK has got really, really beautiful weather and protection from natural disasters. And so it brings us full circle to this idea that people in the UK love to complain about their weather. I'm not exactly sure what the reason for that is, because they have, in some ways, the most beautiful weather, more beautiful than most anywhere in the US. Yet in the US, people don't tend to complain about their weather the same way. They do complain when they have like a blizzard on the same day as they've got 70-degree weather, or when the weather changes like crazy, or obviously they complain about natural disasters. But the UK, they complain about the weather no matter what it is. I guess it's easy to complain, and it's nice to have something to complain about. The weather's always here. But if you're a UK listener, I encourage you, recognize how beautiful your weather is. It really is amazing, especially this time of year in the summer. You're never too far away from a beach, and the weather is just gorgeous. It's not a hot summer like a lot of times you get in the US, and the humidity is not crazy terrible. It's just nice. If you're not a UK listener, if you're from somewhere else in the world, come visit. It's beautiful out here, and the weather's amazing. You absolutely love it. No matter what time of year you come, it's probably going to be more temperate than where you're coming from if you're a US listener. Either way, if you enjoyed this content, do feel free to like and subscribe. We put out new content every single week, and we'll see you guys next time.